Welcome back to another episode of Kicking It with Coach Red, where we bring you all the news, stories, takes, and opinions about your favorite teams from the Pacific Northwest, from the good to the bad to the Mariners.
The heartbreaking Mariners, baby.
Heartbreaking Mariners is right. In this episode, we'll talk a little bit about the heartbreak, which was the ALCS, and then we will talk a little bit more heartful on what this year meant as a whole as a fan of this team, some of the highlights, some of the lowlights. Um, it's kind of a season wrap up. And before, spoiler alert, we're not going to be talking about off-season moves. We're saving that for a later time. So if you hear me yelling at Kane later in the episode to remind him, just remember. But before we do that, I want to tell you a little bit about us. If you're looking for a guy a week after the game that is clear eyes, full heart, can't lose, Friday Night Light call back there. But someone that's been through it enough that can handle the heartbreak a little bit quicker because we're built different. Built different. That's me, your boy, Coach Red. You can find me on X at the real Coach Red, on Instagram at the real underscore Coach Red, TikTok at the real Coach Red. Also find the show over on YouTube. Search Kicking It with Coach Red. Like, subscribe, hit that bell notification, and leave a comment or two. And if you're looking for someone who, even a week later, his eyes are a little glossy, and before the episode, he had to get a little saucy. It's Kane.
That was a good one. Yeah, okay. You can find me over on Twitter, K2406, TikTok, K0624. Also follow the show's socials over on Twitter and Instagram at Coach Red Pod. Pause. Do it, freaking do it.
So I'll break it down kind of game by game and talk about the ALCS. So game one, you come in, you've got Bryce Miller is really the only available starter and ends up giving a home run on his first pitch of the game to ass Springer. I was gonna say
Mhm.
cheating ass Springer. Um, but looked like we were in for a long night. You know, the team looked a little bit tired, a couple of days before they have the 15 inning. You're kind of running on fumes. But as the game goes along, you see things from Julio, you see things from Cal, you see things from Polanco that put you over the top in game one. You get an extended outing, six full innings by
Two
Bryce
hit
Miller.
ball.
It was
Exactly,
crazy.
exactly what you needed from Bryce Miller.
And then you turn around. Logan Gilbert is a guy that was phenomenal in the previous series, coming in on shorter rest. Only gives you three innings, but the Mariners decide to let the bats eat in that game. Polanco, 3-run homer. You got Naylor going deep in that game. You've got Julio staying hot, hitting a 3-run homer in the first inning. I think Cal went yard in that game too, if I'm not mistaken. They poured it on. They took it to Trey Savage, who was absolutely lights out the round before, and you head out of Toronto up 2-0, needing to win 4 games.
Yep, sure did.
Then you come home.
Ugh.
George Kirby gets the start versus Shane Bieber, and George Kirby gets lit up. It was probably comparable with that little league game against the Mets, where he absolutely got shellacked early and often. And because
Mhm.
you, you were able to save your high leverage guys because they didn't have to pitch in that game with Kirby. You had some guys kind of thrown in the middle there, but you were able to get multiple innings out of Carlos Vargas. You were able to get multiple innings out of Emerson Hancock in game two, where Emerson Hancock's not a guy that you're turning around back to back games out of the bullpen. So he was unavailable. And it was just a big letdown because the last time fans were in that stadium, it was absolute euphoria. You're up 2-0. You're coming back home at a place that you played very well all season. And just to have a lackluster performance put a real damper on the series as it was at that point. Then the next game, you've got Luis Castillo versus crazy ass Max Scherzer, and just another performance that you expected the Mariners to do a little bit more. They never really got going. There was a couple of times where they kept it close enough early on in that game to think that you could make that jump. You had I think it was in the sixth or seventh inning, uh, runners on first and second. Gino puts one into right field. Polanco scores from second. Naylor tries to take third and gets absolutely hosed by Addison Barger. And that was really the last hoorah where you felt like they were building something in that inning. Or even if they got one more hit and one more run, I think you're looking at a different outcome. But it just never materialized. And back to back lackluster games. I was at that game. Um, there were way too many Jays fans. And I will say this, I haven't been to really any Jays games during the regular season. It's tough. You got a lot of people coming down from Canada because it's the only time they get to see their team. And I cannot stand Jays fans after that game, especially the Canadian ones. There's a nice family behind me, all Blue Jays fans, seemed nice enough. But the dad was just trying to, there were a couple of younger kids, and he's just trying to explain the game and just like saying the most generic things the whole time. Like, oh, yeah, Barger, he's really got, I got a feeling he's really going to lace one here, boys. I think so. And I'm just like, I want to turn around and punch him. And then when I was leaving, there were some nasty Jays fans just chirping. It's like, hey, it's the sport of baseball. I know it's the playoffs. It's very heightened times for everybody, but the ability for them to degrade people in their home stadium. I understand if people are jawing at each other the whole time, but some of the things I saw in her were pretty just out of pocket. And I hope that the Blue Jays do not win the World Series. I hope the Blue Jays never win a World Series based on and it's probably the few, but God, their fans were just something else and not in a good way.
Yeah, I mean, uh, tight end Gonzalez got a lot of flack when he went out at Rogers Center for both games. He got chirped at pretty hard, apparently. So,
Yep.
not yeah,
Well, and the
games
other
three and
thing is,
four
it
were
doesn't really,
bad.
and with tight end, it didn't seem like he was necessarily chirping hard. And he seems like a guy that's going to have playful banter and not go at anybody with malice. And at least that's what he described on the back end, too. And it's
Yeah.
like, hey, guys, not everyone that lives in Toronto, not everyone that lives in Seattle is a fan of the home team. And I get that. And I want some playful ribbing, I think is fine. But to attack people, I think is wild.
Wild. All right, game five.
But the Mariners do have something about theatrics for game five at home in the playoffs. It's not something that we've seen in a very long time, but this year it was something to behold. And you have the Mariners that I believe were down 2-1. Cal Raleigh goes yard right handed to tie the game, end up getting the bases loaded, and Gino hits his second homer of the game, which is which is a grand slam, and sends the place into complete euphoria in the eighth inning. And it's something that I think, with the amount of good vibes that we have gotten from Gino in the 2.5 years that he has been here, was such a cool moment for him and for Seattle as a whole to really be yearning for a win after two lackluster performances, and really up to that point a pretty lackluster offensive performance, right? And you've got Brycey Boy back on the bump going deep into the game. And the craziest thing is games started in the playoffs by the two best starters that you will see in Kevin Gossman and Tariq Skubal. The Mariners won every single one of those contests where they
Mhm.
started. And that is what you need to do in playoff baseball. But as the Mariners were outed, you've got to be able to beat a guy who's been okay since coming back from Tommy John surgery. You've got to beat 41-year-old Max Scherzer. You took advantage of the rookie in game two. You abandoned that same game plan back in Toronto, and not a close game in game six. Not a close game in game six. They didn't really get it going. They
No, they
chased a lot more than they did in game one. They didn't make Savage play in the zone, and it really bit him in the butt. And it was another.
anytime they had anything, it was a double play or they'd strike out the rest of the game.
I mean, they ended 3 innings with a double play, two of those with the bases loaded. And I think that if you can score 1 or 2 runs in those situations, that the whole feeling within that game is different. The
Sure.
moves that are made later in that game could have potentially set you up better for game seven as well.
And I mean, game seven was great
It was great until it
until
wasn't.
it wasn't. I mean, it sucks. Bizzardo threw that pitch load away.
Well, game four, Naylor goes yard for a second time in Toronto. You have Cal Raleigh going yard in this game. I believe Julio also went yard in this game. And
But it was on fire.
you put yourself in a position to win. And there's been a lot of conversations. George Kirby goes 5 innings, one hit ball, 1 run given up. And you're wondering if you have him go another inning. You turn to Brian Wu, who has two phenomenal innings, gets in a little trouble. You've got 1 out. You've got runners at first and second. You have George Springer up to bat, and you go to Edward Bizzardo instead of going to
I
Munoz.
I
Lost
get
flack.
it. I get it as well, but I just break in case of emergency. That's what honestly it is.
If I were in Dan Wilson's shoes in that game, I'm doing exactly what he did.
Bizzardo's been pretty nails all year in all playoffs.
Bizzardo had the one bad outing in Detroit, but he had pitched multiple times against the Blue Jays. The night before, he went 2 innings on 15 pitches, getting out of jams. Bizzardo was top 5 in not letting inherited runners score. He's your ultimate stop guy. The other thing is, I feel if you go to Munoz there, you saw a couple of times within the playoffs that Matt Brash was getting hit around, right? Hindsight's all 2020 as well. Leading up to that game, Andres Munoz had not given up a hit the first two batters he faces in the next inning. What's he do? Gives up two base hits back to back. Would it be a different result? We don't know, right?
Mm,
The Mariners had opportunities. They had runners in scoring position in,
multiple
I believe, the
times.
seventh and the eighth, and then didn't get it done in the ninth. And I think that the ultimate crux of these things is you had Leo Rivas, who
Didn't swing the bat.
he did not swing the bat well in game seven. He had his moment in the opening series, and a lot of his at bats up until game seven were very good at bats. A lot of in Seattle, he had two balls that were played ridiculously by Barger in right field that not everyone's making those plays. And you're very close to those games getting turned around with Leo Rivas hitting a couple of doubles, right? He was
Yeah.
smoking the ball and he hit that one that almost went out in game six. So, but I do think that taking out Robles, who had two walks on the day, he had one poor swing early in the game, but it had been very good within the zone. I think that going getting Canzone, who wasn't hitting for power, he was not it
Swinging
was
very
either it was either
good.
to the first baseman, to the second baseman, or it squeaked through the four hole or barely squeaked through the middle. His at bat was not good. And then Julio getting up 2-0 and then chasing a couple pitches out to end the season is it sucks, especially when you've got Cal Raleigh on deck and a guy that has shown that he is built for that moment. And Julio has done the same. Um, and you are one game away from not having the moniker of the only team that has not advanced to the World Series.
Yeah. And another thing, like Randy was almost non-existent.
Uh, the last couple of games, Randy started to show up. You didn't necessarily see it with the power.
Sure.
When he hit that home run late in the blowout, he started getting on base more. He started,
Hmm.
it wasn't just walks or hit by pitches. He was getting on, he was hitting the ball well, and was a menace every time he was on the base paths.
That is true. I just needed playoff Randy to just, you know,
Ran-
be there.
you also have to look at it, you're 5 years removed from the most insane run that you've seen a guy do.
Yeah.
He had 10 homers in that playoffs. Like it was before his official rookie season, right? So
Mm.
did I expect that level? No. But at the same time,
His
Randy's a
second
guy who
half
got a little streaky,
was
right? And his second half wasn't great, but
no.
you saw little pockets where he would get hot and he just never really got fully hot until that last bit. I think that if they would have advanced, you could have seen a little bit more of him continue to progress. But sitting there, I would have legitimately hit Mitch Garver over Dom Canzone. Garver, when you look at the ALDS, has the big sack fly, hits a triple in Rogers Center. He was striking the ball well. And I think that although we've seen him have some pretty terrible at bats, it gives you the opportunity because you can immediately then go to Mastroboni to go in and take that spot, run the bases, be able to play in the outfield if needed, right? You're in a spot where you can potentially make something happen. But
Yep.
then you're also in a spot where, who do you go to in the bullpen at that point? That's the thing where are you going to be able to cross the finish line? And it's tough knowing how close they were. It's the deepest run that they've ever made. They've never been to a game seven. And it's tough. I got a slew of messages and calls that night. And the one thing, I wanted to say, I think with what they've built and the young talent that they have, there's no reason they shouldn't be in a similar position to make a deep playoff run last year. The Mariners won 116 games in 2001 and then did not go back to the playoffs for 21 years.
Yeah.
So it's tough to say that. But when you look at the long term building blocks that they have on this team in Cal Raleigh, in Julio Rodriguez as your primary table setters, you still have four controllable starters and Luis Castillo, who is under contract for 3 more years, who, if he pitches somewhat close to not even at the level he did, but if he can increase his road starts earlier in the season more consistently throughout the year and having this entire staff more healthy, it puts you in a better spot. And you're seeing the progression of Julio, where he ended up as the top war guy in center field. You have the top war guy behind the plate. JP, has his up and down years, but he's usually good for a moment or two, right? And he had a big double in game 7. And then you've got some question marks as well. You've got Randy, who was an all-star, kind of fizzled down the back half. You had Robles, who was injured a majority of the year and really didn't get that long ramp up time, and who was a lightning rod for you the year before. You've got Cole Young, who showed you at times what he's able to do, but really saw his playing time fizzle and was even left off the second round roster. You've got Ben Williamson, whose defense is crazy. And with what's going to happen at third base with pending free agent of Gino. And then you also look at first base. What are you going to do there? And we're not talking about the offseason plans in this episode, but you also have a lot of controllable relievers that have pitched in high leverage situations. Munoz, Brash, Spire, Bizardo, Gregory Santos should be back. And if healthy, you know what he can do from his time in Chicago. So that could be another arm that you throw into the pile, right? You've got a good young farm system. You've got Colt Emerson, who was in the taxi squad, who's beaten on the door, should be with the big squad at some point next year. You have
Mhm.
Ryan Bliss, who is a maven on the base paths, who got hurt early on in the season and wasn't able to get back before the end of the year. You've got what's it, Kate Anderson, who
Yeah.
you could see take a similar path to Atreya Savage and potentially be on this squad. You saw times that Logan Evans looked damn near unhittable, right? You've seen Emerson Hancock have stretches where he looks really good and other times where he looks bad. So you have potential within this team. You have the pieces coming up through your farm system to set the table for an extended run. And it just hurts so bad when you are so close to the
Yeah.
doorstep.
I mean, we're invested, man, and they this was outside of probably one more move at the deadline. Don't know what it could have been, right? But like ownership basically went all in and
They
did
finally
what
stepped up.
they did what everybody wanted, right? They went and got the two best hitters. Caleb Ferguson was an all right reliever. Wasn't the best, but he was an all right reliever. But
Mm-hmm.
again, they tried, and Naylor put this team over the hump, man. Like, hit on all cylinders with the trade.
Yeah, and Gino, although his power numbers went a little bit down and his strikeout numbers went up, he still was able to provide pop when you needed it,
Mhm.
right? So when you look at this season as a whole, you are going to sit there and be pretty upset, right?
Yeah.
But I think that when you put some time behind it, we're all going to look back very fondly at this season for moments. And there's going to be times, that we look back with some disgust, right? Not being able to take care of the athletics on a consistent basis would have potentially helped and maybe put them in a higher seed and that you're hosting game 7, right? They're only 2 games out of that spot. Their ability early on in the season to beat up on lesser competition, but not against the big boys, ended up hurting them in the long run. You look at the injury bug that plagued the starting rotation, where you saw this team not have George Kirby on roster for the first 2 months, where you saw Bryce Miller gutting it through because he knew how thin they were on starting pitching, which led to a long absence and him not getting back on track to what we saw the year before. Brian Wu getting hurt late in the season and not being available until the second round of the playoffs, right? Logan Gilbert missing time and seeing glimpses of what we know Walter to be. And then, the injury bug hit harder this year, but you saw the most historic season out of a catcher. You saw a guy that could potentially still win the MVP, win the home run derby, set the single season American League record for home runs. You saw Julio put together a more complete season. He started off hotter than he usually did, got a little bit cold right before the All-Star break, takes the All-Star break off, and then comes out like a madman during the second half, like we're accustomed to. You saw walk-off winners from your young guys in Harry Ford and Cole Young. You saw Dom Canzone somehow hit 300 in the big leagues with some
Have
pop.
a 3-homer game too.
There you saw Ben Williamson and Gino, both knock down balls off of Vladdy's bat once during the regular season and once during the postseason, coming in at plus 115 on a diving play, right? And Robles coming out of no man's land in right field against Houston and just sweep that feeling of sweeping that series and knowing that you're in the driver's seat for the division for the first time. There's a lot of questions around the American League going forward. Houston's going to have to make some decisions. Is Framber Valdez back? A lot of people think no.
Yeah.
Their starting staff's not where it has been. You have an aging Altuve. You have Jordan Alvarez, who was banged up most of the year and a body type that usually does not age super well. So, and then you got a Texas team who I think a lot of people can say underperformed. I think their starting staff still has a lot of question marks, and your reliance on Adolis Garcia, who's very boomer bust, Jonah Heim, who's very boomer bust, Corey Seager with the health issues, and you saw a down year from Simeon, and them deciding for some reason unbeknownst to me that they thought that Jake Berger was a better option at first base than Nathaniel Lowe, right? There's question marks within the division. So this is poised for the Mariners to kind of put their stake going forward to have continued success.
Yeah, I mean, it just I do think that this is important for the future on what this offseason brings. I know we're not getting into that, but this whole year was, as you said, magical, right? You had the fans outside of every playoff game, right? Every win, just dancing, living life. Like this is, you know, it was the best feeling on earth.
Well, and you went into the season 2 where the fans were upset. There was not really a lot that was done during the offseason. Your big move was Jorge Polanco coming off of knee surgery, right? Didn't get you excited. It
Golly.
didn't get you juiced. And
It
that was
got me excited. It got me juiced, and you all laughed at me.
okay. He had his moments. There were similar things where you
Yeah,
saw the ups and downs, but what he was able to deliver in clutch time throughout the playoffs is something that
throughout the
we'll talk
year.
about for a long time. But I think that you could tell that Seattle has been starved for baseball competency and for glimpses of greatness for such a long time, and how invested people will get. And you look at us in particular, we've had to shortchange the Seahawks in their 5-2 run because we were so invested in the Mariners and watching every single pitch and every single out of the playoffs that the Seahawks took a back seat. And I did a little bit of math. I probably watched 150 games this year, and most of them all the way through. If you average that to about 3 hours, that is over 20 days of this calendar year that I spent pouring time into the
Mariners.
Mariners. That's why I will not be watching the World Series. As soon as the Mariners are out, I am done. I put in
Yep.
my time for the year. I will see you in spring training. I am good for the rest of the year. But I wouldn't change
Well.
watching the Mariners.
Yeah.
What? I'm not watching a minute of the World Series.
No, I never mind. World Baseball Classic starts during spring training.
That's different. I will watch that. But
Because
till this calendar year, I'm done
yeah,
watching
no, I get
baseball.
it. We gonna watch America's Ass, so it's gonna be great.
But it's just one of those things where I think if the front office makes a move that I think every single person and their mother wants to have done that is a Mariners fan, and they do a little bit more to show, you're going to start seeing people showing up earlier in the season. You're going to start feeling that buzz, that home field advantage. And if the Mariners can start off at a solid pace, I don't think it's going to slow down the whole
I
year.
know. Nah, it's you know you have to do like I said on the phone earlier. You have to spend money to make money, and like if you put a good product on the field, fans will come up and enjoy the product, especially with all the new things that you've done at the stadium. Like they've made it a little bit more affordable to go, right? Like day of tickets are cheap, their value menu and all that. It's cheaper than spending $15 on a beer. That's all I'm saying.
Yes. Um, They have the new rideshare parking lot. You can't forget about that. But
I don't live out there, so I don't know.
as a whole, um, I think that we're ready.
Yeah.
Um,
Like, it's a good year. Like you finished first in the division for the first time in 24 years. Like, let's go run this thing back.
and you can't expect to see the historic year that you saw from Cal year in,
No.
year out, right? I don't think you can see what you saw out of JP through the entirety of the year for another full year. For him being
Yeah.
healthy, that was kind of one of his worst years with the team. I think you can still expect to see Julio continue to grow
Yeah.
into that role and still be a guy that is kind of low key one of the top players in the league. I think you can see Cole Young be able to take that next step forward. I think that you're going to see some more dynamic play when you get Ryan Bliss back on the base paths. I think that a fully healthy, full training camp, full everything, Victor Robles inspires a little bit more confidence, right? I think that it's been talked about a lot. The Mariners, their downfall in the series against the Jays was their 7, 8, 9 hitters in the totality of that series. And if you're going to be sitting there and having Cal and Julio batting near the top of that lineup, you're going to need to make sure that the bottom half has some traffic on the base paths to let them eat, right?
Yeah.
And we'll be talking about that in some of the off-season moves that we would like them to make. And I've got one that I've pounded the table, I think, 3 or 4 times for, but I think it's going to ring true a little bit louder this year. That I think will be a play that you are going to love, but you're going to have to wait a week to hear about it. We've developed from the inside, we've augmented slightly, and the trade deadline has been somewhere where Jerry has excelled. It's time
Mhm.
to take that next step forward and be able to spend the money to the right players at the right time, not spend bats on platoon players.
Yeah,
You
you
know,
need everyday players because platoon players are great, right? They are. You got split guys, that's cool. But you know what's cooler? Having guys that can hit righties and lefties.
play every day, and be able to spell them. And I think that the Mariners will continue to implore a lot of multi position type players like you can get out of Leo Rivas, like you can get out of Miles Mastroboni. I don't think Luke Rayleigh is going to want to come back after being left off that ALDS roster. But I mean, I think that he
CS.
should not have been left off, and I think he would have gotten a lot of playing time in the last 3 to 4 games.
I
And
agree
I
with
think he would
that
have made a
statement.
difference.
Yeah. I don't know. Like Dom Canzone was not good.
And I think you really get to see the only way that I think Cal can have some semblance of the season is him not having to be behind the dish as much
I would like
this
to see
year.
Harry Ford
I
behind the dish
Harry Ford
a
will
good
be
amount.
your number two, and he's shown that he is a good defensive catcher. And I think that him being around this team and getting to know the pitching staff at the big league level is going to help tremendously in his growth for
I
next
agree.
year. And I think that that allows you to give Cal Raleigh some more DH bats, which then allows you to keep him fresher as the year goes along and keep him in the game almost every single day.
Mhm. Yeah, I can agree with that.
So it it sucks to be close, and it sucks that we're so excited about how far they went and how heartbroken that we were. But
Mhm.
there are so many moments that happened this year. Like when you look back in the history of the Mariners. You've got your single game performances, right? That, a couple of perfect games, a couple of no hitters. You have some ridiculous plays in the outfield by Ken Griffey Jr., by Ichiro Suzuki, by Franklin Gutierrez, by Mike Cameron that you can look back. You can look back at some single game performances or Griffey hitting homers in 7 straight days, Mike Cameron hitting 4 homers in a game. You can look at those things. But when you really look back at the Mariners as a whole, there were two shining moments that stuck out. And it was the double and Cal Raleigh's home run to put you back into the playoffs. You did have the miraculous comeback in Toronto in the wild card game, but when you look at a 15 inning game that gets walked off by Polanco. That's a moment that we're not going to forget for a long time. When you look at Gino hitting 2 home runs and 1 grand slam to win game 5, that's not something that we're going to forget for a long time. To have two of those legacy type moments for a team that has not reached the mountaintop in one season, it will be good and nostalgic to look back at. But like
For
we said,
sure.
you've got to take that next step. You've got to make that push, right? Every team starts the year, well, most teams, I don't think every team, most teams step into the year with the expectation to make the playoffs and make a deep run and eventually make their way and win the
Oh.
World Series. And I think the Mariners, with the way that they are currently constructed, have the talent to do that.
Yeah, I do too. Just all depends on what they do this offseason and how they kind of structure this team. for the upcoming season.
And one thing I will touch on, and I think that it will have to get better next year, and I think that it will get better. It's your first full season of Dan Wilson as a manager, and I think that ever since the Carpenter home run against George Kirby against Detroit, he got very gun shy with his pitching decisions, and had realized I was late once. I'm not going to do it again. Instead of feeling the vibe, man. And I
Taking
think that
Bryce out, I just
I think that there were quite a few times where it's like, hey, you got to let this guy wear it a little bit more, like Logan in game 3. Like, hey, it was a close game. Could
yeah.
have turned if you kept him in, but the not knowing, what's going to come in game 3, not knowing what's going to come in game 4. I think they pulled Luis a little early in game 4.
Way early.
I think that they probably pulled Bryce a hair early in game 6,
A
probably
hair
in
early.
game 5. I mean, and same thing in game 1. I think you could have got another inning out of Bryce if we're really being honest. I
You
think George Kirby,
pulled Brian Wu.
you know, it's it's things that I think Dan Wilson has a good case for manager of the year,
Oh, I think he wins it.
and I think that although it hurts and you don't want the playoffs to be a learning experience. The moral of the story is it's a learning experience, except for one team, right? Unless you were just the team like the Tigers last year, you weren't expected to be there. You had a miracle run to get in, and you rode that to the ALDS, right? You weren't expected to be there. It was a little early for what you thought their timetable was.
Right.
Like you could look and find your positives in that, but most teams are when you make the playoffs, I'm here to win the World Series and nothing else. And I think the Mariners were squarely in that camp, and they said they're ready. They're ready,
Yeah.
and I'm ready to see what this offseason unfolds as. I'm interested to see what they're going to do with the farm, whether they're going to let it sit or whether they're going to go make a play for some high impact players. It's going to be the most, I know we've said this most years, but this is going to be the most critical offseason that they have to
I believe
see
so.
how this team advances for the next at least 5 years.
Yeah, because I'm not even gonna put it into existence. I'm just not. Just not. I want this to be the moment that Stanton and Co. sort of like, let's make the push.
Yep. And I'm ready for our listeners to make the push to give us a follow over on social media. You can find
Got
me,
him.
your boy, Coach Red, on X at the Real Coach Red, on Instagram at the Real _ Coach Red, TikTok at the Real Coach Red. Also, find the show over on YouTube. Search Kicking It with Coach Red. Like, subscribe, hit that bell notification, and leave a comment or two. Kane, where you at?
Find me over on Twitter, K2406, TikTok, K0624. Also follow the show's socials over on Twitter and Instagram at Coach Red Pod. False. Do it, friggin' do it.
And as always, stay fresh.
Stay fresh, peeps.
Peace.